Pain is the initiation. Only the chosen ones endure it for higher wisdom. There's a doorway that most people never walk through, and the key to that doorway isn't love, it's not peace, it's not even truth, it's pain. Deep, soul-racking, ego-shattering pain. The kind of pain that silences you, humbles you, and breaks you open like a seed cracking under the pressure of the soil just before it reaches the light. Most people run from pain. We're taught to escape it, numb it, distract ourselves from it. But what if I told you that pain is not the enemy, it's the invitation? What if I told you that pain is not a punishment, but the sacred fire that forges the chosen ones into beings of wisdom, clarity, and unshakable presence? I've seen this truth in the eyes of monks who've sat in silence for years, in the trembling hands of those who survived loss so deep it redefined them. In my own journey, I felt it, when everything I thought I was fell apart, when I lost what I could not afford to lose, when the screams of my soul echoed louder than anything outside, I met something profound. I met myself, without the mask. And I met something else too, the ancient force that lives inside all of us, waiting to be awakened through the gate of suffering.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lesson.
You might be asking, why pain? Why does it have to hurt so much? Why not joy? Why not beauty? The truth is, joy and beauty are the rewards. They're the gifts that come after the fire. But pain is the purifier. Pain is the teacher that strips away illusion. It doesn't lie to you, it doesn't flatter you, it shows you clearly and mercilessly what you are clinging to and what you must release. It shows you where you are still afraid, where your ego still rules and where your soul is still asleep. Think about your own life. Remember the moment when you were at your lowest, not just sad, not just lost, I mean broken. Do you remember what it felt like to cry and not know if the tears would ever stop? To scream into the silence and hear nothing but your own despair echoing back? That moment, right there, is sacred. That's the moment your soul begins to wake up. That's the moment the veil starts to lift. But here's the catch. Most people don't stay there. They run. They numb. They distract. They tell themselves stories to avoid facing the real work. I get it. It's terrifying. The pain feels like death. And in a way, it is. It's the death of your false self, the part of you that was built on approval, performance, and protection, the part that was never real to begin with. Pain calls you to let it die, not with violence, but with surrender. And here's the paradox. The more you resist the pain, the more it hurts. When you fight it, it claws back harder. But when you finally say, "I'm ready, show me," something miraculous happens. The pain doesn't disappear, but it begins to transform. It becomes a guide, a compass, a sacred fire that leads you deeper, not into suffering, but into truth. And the deeper you go, the more you realize the pain was never trying to destroy you, it was trying to awaken you. I ask you now, what pain are you still running from? What wound have you buried so deeply that you've forgotten it's shaping everything you do? What grief, what shame, what betrayal still echoes in the chambers of your heart, waiting for you to finally turn toward it, not to fix it, but to feel it? Because here's the secret, you don't need to heal your pain, you need to become intimate with it. Sit with it, breathe with it, let it speak, let it burn, let it teach. You see, only the chosen ones endure it, not because they are better, not because they are stronger, but because they choose not to run. They choose presence over comfort, truth over illusion, depth over safety, and in that choice they are initiated. They become the few who walk the path that most never find. They become the ones who carry wisdom not from books, but from scars. Wisdom that lives in their bones, wisdom that can look another suffering soul in the eye and say, "I've been there, I know the way through." But the way through is not a map. It's a descent into the belly of your own darkness, into the memories you've buried, the fears you've denied, the truths about yourself you've tried to cover with achievement, spirituality, or distraction. The chosen ones are not those who have mastered pain. They are those who have allowed pain to master them, to humble them, to strip them down until nothing is left but raw presence, and then from that place they rise, not as who they were, but as who they are. I know this might not be what you want to hear. We all want shortcuts. We want the light without the shadow, the crown without the cross, but life doesn't work that way. Transformation is earned, not through effort but through surrender, not through doing more, but by being with what is. And what is, right now, in this moment, is your pain. Not as a curse, but as a calling. So I ask you again, will you answer it? Will you finally stop running and sit in the fire? Will you allow the pain to break you not into pieces, but into truth? Because on the other side of that fire is something you cannot imagine. A peace that doesn't depend on circumstances, a love that doesn't waver, a clarity that cuts through illusion like lightning through the night. But to get there, you must pass through the initiation. You must pass through yourself. And so I leave you with this. What if your greatest pain was actually your greatest privilege? What if the very thing you've been trying to avoid is the very thing that will set you free? The threshold of fire. Why most people flee before the transformation. There is a moment in every spiritual journey when the fire gets hotter. Not just warm, not uncomfortable, scorching. It's when every part of your mind screams, "Get out!" It's a threshold. And it's there, precisely there, that most people turn around. They say, "This isn't working." They say, "It's too much." But the ones who continue, those are the ones who are chosen, not by some divine lottery, but by their own choice to stay. You see, initiation isn't a ceremony with candles and chants. It's the moment you refuse to flee your own darkness. It's the moment you stop asking life to be easy and instead ask, "What is this trying to awaken in me?" That's when the fire stops being a punishment and becomes a purification. But you only discover that after you've walked through the part that feels like death. Most don't make it that far. Why? Because modern life has sold us the lie that pain is a problem, that happiness is the baseline, that we deserve comfort at all costs. Social media shows you the highlight reels, not the holy descent. Spirituality is often marketed like a product. Crystal sets, manifestation techniques, and aesthetic meditation corners. But true spirituality is raw, it's bloody, it's unfiltered. It tears everything fake away. And when it does, you're left alone with one question. Who am I without my masks? That's why most people flee. Because the pain doesn't just hurt, it threatens your identity. It strips you of the things you think define you, your achievements, your beliefs, your relationships, your sense of control. It leaves you naked. And that kind of nakedness feels like annihilation. But here's the truth that only those who endure discover. What's being annihilated is not you, it's who you thought you were. We spend our lives building a false self, a self made of stories, stories about who we need to be worthy, stories about what life should look like to be meaningful. Pain smashes those stories. It doesn't ask for permission, it arrives like a storm and leaves you staring at the ruins of what you thought was your life. But in that rubble, something begins to stir, something ancient, something real. It's your true self buried under years of performance. So when the fire gets hotter, when the pressure mounts, when the silence becomes deafening, that's not the time to run. That's the moment to lean in. Because what's dying is the illusion, and what's being born is the truth. Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like your entire life was falling apart, only to realize later that it was actually falling into place? That moment of collapse, that unbearable rupture, wasn't the end, it was the clearing, the sacred demolition. But you only see it for what it is after you've walked through the fire. I remember a time when I was brought to my knees by something I couldn't control. I had built my life around certainty, around knowing the path, around being the one who always had the answers. But then something came, call it fate, call it karma, call it divine chaos, and it shattered everything. I lost my sense of purpose, I lost people I loved, I lost myself. And in that abyss, I could have fled, I could have numbed out, distracted myself, reinvented a new identity. But something told me to stay, to feel every ounce of it, to let the sorrow rip through me like a storm. And in that surrender, something happened. I stopped fighting. I stopped pretending, and I started listening. Listening to the silence beneath the pain, the silence that doesn't scream, but speaks. The silence that whispers truths no one else can tell you, because they are meant only for you. That silence is terrifying, because it doesn't offer you comfort, it offers you confrontation. It mirrors back everything you've avoided, but it also holds the seed of your becoming. In that silence, I met the part of me that can't be shaken, the part that doesn't need approval or success or answers, the part that is, regardless of what happens outside. And that's what the fire is trying to reveal. It's not trying to hurt you, it's trying to burn away everything you are not. It's trying to forge you into something unbreakable, not because you never feel pain again, but because you no longer fear it. That's real power, power that doesn't dominate, but radiates, power that doesn't control, but liberates. So many people stop at the threshold. They get to the edge of transformation and turn back, not because they're weak, but because they haven't been taught how to endure. We've been conditioned to escape discomfort, to seek quick fixes, to bypass the hard work. But initiation demands endurance. It demands presence. It demands that you trust the process, even when everything inside you says, this can't be right. But what if it is right? What if the pain you're feeling isn't a sign of something going wrong, but of something finally going right? What if it's your soul breaking free from the prison of your illusions? What if the fire was never meant to destroy you, but to reveal you? Think about that. What if the very thing you're resisting is the thing that will awaken your deepest truth? What if the discomfort you feel is not a problem to solve, but an initiation to accept? What if the breaking point you fear is actually the birthing point of your power? Only the chosen ones discover this, not because they have superhuman strength, but because they stay. They stay with the pain, they stay with the silence, they stay with the questions that have no answers, and eventually they emerge, not as who they were, but as who they were always meant to be. So I invite you now, not to avoid, not to escape, but to stay. Stay with the fire. Stay with the ache. Stay with the truth that is trying to rise through the cracks of your old life. Because on the other side of this threshold is a version of you that has never been seen, a version of you that doesn't need to prove anything, fix anything, or become anything, a version of you that simply is, and that isness is sacred beyond words. And so I ask you, not with pressure, but with presence, will you stay? Will you walk through the fire that has called so few and transformed even fewer? Will you let go of who you think you are, so that you can remember who you've always been? Because the fire is not your enemy, the fire is your doorway. The silence that screams, where pain turns into power. There is a moment in the journey where the pain softens, but not because it disappears, it softens because you change. You no longer see the pain as a threat, you see it as a teacher, a guide, a mirror. And in that shift, something begins to happen that's hard to explain because it can't be described in words. It can only be felt in the marrow of your being. It's the moment when silence stops being empty and starts to feel full, full of presence, full of intelligence, full of power. This is the silence that most people never reach. It's not the silence of a quiet room, it's the silence of a quiet mind, a silence that echoes louder than any noise, a silence that holds everything without judgment. And in that silence, you begin to hear things you couldn't hear before, not voices or visions, but truth. And not truth like facts, truth like knowing, truth like clarity that comes not from thinking, but from being. You sit there, maybe on the floor, maybe in the forest, maybe in your car after another breakdown, and suddenly you realize you're not broken, you were never broken, you were breaking through, and all the chaos, all the grief, all the confusion, it wasn't punishment, it was preparation. You were being reshaped by something far more intelligent than your ego. You were being sculpted by the hands of the sacred. But here's the paradox. The sacred doesn't feel sacred when you're in it. It feels like loss, it feels like loneliness, it feels like nothingness, and yet it's in that nothingness that everything is born. You begin to feel a kind of peace that doesn't make sense, a kind of joy that isn't loud but steady, a kind of love that isn't based on conditions, it just is. And for the first time, you stop chasing. You stop needing things to be a certain way to feel whole. You are whole, not because life changed, but because you did. This is what pain was trying to lead you to all along. Not to more pain, not to more suffering, but to presence. Real presence. The kind that doesn't flinch when life gets hard. The kind that doesn't crumble when things go wrong. The kind that can hold space for others without trying to fix them, because you've learned to hold space for yourself. And then something even more mysterious happens. You realize that your pain has become your gift. The wound you thought disqualified you from love becomes the doorway through which you can love more deeply than ever before. The fear you thought would destroy you becomes the compass that guides you into truth. You begin to speak differently, move differently, live differently, not because you're trying to look spiritual, but because you've become what others are still pretending to be. Let me ask you this: what kind of power would you carry if you no longer feared your own pain? How would you walk into the world if you knew that nothing could take away your essence? Not rejection, not failure, not even death. Can you imagine the freedom in that? Can you feel the weight that would fall off your shoulders if you no longer had to protect a false self? That's the gift of initiation. It doesn't give you more tools to escape life. It gives you the presence to meet life fully, fiercely. And that presence is power. The sacred return, becoming the one who walks with light. Once you have passed through the fire, once you've sat with the silence that stripped you bare, once you've allowed the pain to teach you what nothing else could, then comes the return. But this return is not to who you were, it's a return to what you are. And what you are is light. Not the light that blinds, not the light that performs, but the light that simply is, steady, humble, and radiant from the inside out. You return to the world, but you are no longer ruled by it. You walk among people, but your center is no longer outside of you. You still feel pain, but it no longer defines you. You no longer flinch at discomfort because you know what it's for. You no longer run from the shadows because you've sat long enough in the dark to know that even the darkness is sacred. The chosen ones don't look different on the outside. They're not always the loudest, they don't always seek the spotlight, but when they speak, something in you listens. When they're present, you feel safe. When they touch your life, things shift. Not because they're trying to change you, but because they've changed themselves. Their very presence carries a transmission, a frequency, a quiet echo of the truth they've earned through fire. This return is not about preaching. It's not about saving others or proving anything. It's about carrying the wisdom you've earned like a hidden gem, one that sparkles in your actions, not just your words. You begin to live in alignment with something deeper than logic. You trust your intuition. You move from presence. You speak from stillness. And when life throws chaos your way again, as it always will, you no longer collapse. You respond, not react, respond, from the depth of a soul that has already died and been reborn. And that's the real initiation, not the pain itself, but the resurrection that follows, the rebirth into a version of yourself that isn't built on fear, performance, or control, but on truth, real lived truth. And from this truth you begin to serve, not because you have to, but because you can't not. You become a vessel of understanding, a mirror for others who are still running from their own sacred fire. But here's the secret. You don't need to tell them what to do. You don't need to convince anyone of anything. Your presence will do that for you. Because when someone who has walked through their own hell looks you in the eye and says, "You're going to make it," you believe them. Not because they said the right words, but because they are the right words. They embody the knowing. And when you embody knowing, you become a light that others didn't know they were searching for. So I ask you now, not as a challenge, but as a calling, will you become that light? Will you allow your pain to become your passage? Will you stop running from the very thing that is trying to make you whole? We live in a world that desperately needs people who have walked through fire and come out kind, who have been shattered but still choose love, who have met their own darkness and now carry light, not as a performance, but as a quiet revolution. Because in the end, the pain was never the enemy. It was the guide, the portal, the sacred storm. And now, you, yes, you, have the choice to return, not as a victim, not even as a survivor, but as a carrier of truth, as one who walks with light. And the world will never be the same when you do. Now go, walk not away from the fire, but as one who has mastered it. Be the one others recognize not by your words, but by your being. Because pain was the initiation, and you, my friend, have endured.